Hello, everyone. I'm Sahid. Thank you so much for clicking this video and thank you for joining me. If you're new here, I'm deeply welcoming you to my channel. And yeah, I'm very glad that you're here. So, for the past few weeks, and I think over a month now, that the past few weeks now I've been reading Canadian literature, and I've been reading this book in particular called Moon of the Crusted Snow by waubgeshig, and it's been a really interesting and fun experience for me. Um, reading this book and being open to a different sort of perspective, a different background from um, sort of the books I typically read. And so just reading this book, which is very different, like I mentioned, and to just sort of explain how it's sort of different for me is because I've never read Canadian literature before, and this is the first Canadian literature book that I'm reading, and so it's just been very meaningful for me. And doing it as a part of a reading club has been really exciting for me as well. And so, guys, before we even get to today's reading, I just want to say that I feel very guilty. And I have my reasons to why I feel guilty right now. Particularly, it's pertaining to books. I feel very guilty because for the past, I think, 7 days since November started, I have not read, and that's bad. And I feel very just sad because one, I told myself that with this new sort of avid reading journey of mine, I needed to make sure that I read daily. And so me not making time to read has just completely made me feel guilty throughout these past few days because I know that this is something I told myself I wanted to do very often and daily, and me not doing that is just completely wrong. And I'm about to tell you why I haven't been reading, but despite this reason, it shouldn't excuse me not still trying to find a way to include this to my daily routine. And so I will just me acknowledging it is a way of me growing from it. So hopefully I learn from this and be able to prioritize reading into my daily routine. So the reason mostly is because of school. If you are new to my channel, I'm currently a student at a community college. It's my first semester, and it's November and it's about to be December, which is the end of the semester. And so we've been having a lot of assignments and exams and also projects to sort of start ending off things and also leading us to the final. And so it's been very busy for me these past few days, and this upcoming days as well. It's going to be quite hectic because I have a lot of projects and exams coming up. But I will still, like I said, prioritize reading. It's not an excuse. It's something I told myself I want to do daily, and so doing it is what's important. Even when I'm not recording, I need to make sure to read. Yeah, and so, and when I say read, I want to read things that are not necessarily academic focused. So books I've been reading or things that I've been sort of consuming has not been things like fiction, like this book that I'm reading. So I want to make time for the fictions and for things that are not necessarily academically focused, if you understand. But for every of my video, I like to sort of go back to sort of reflect on the things that I've read from this book that I showed earlier. And so from chapter 1 to chapter 7, To give a brief summary, this book is about an indigenous community that's located within the northern region in Canada, known as the Anishinaabe community. And this community is very strong on hunting, fishing, giving back. It's sort of their custom, their tradition, and it's been their way of life for a very long time. And it's sort of how they survive and they live and they provide for themselves and their family. And to sort of introduce you to the characters, we have been introduced to quite a bit of characters, but the few main ones, I'm going to try to list them. So the first one we were introduced to, the first character we were introduced to is Even White Sky. He's a father of two. He is, this very, I like to describe him as hardworking. He grew up learning how to hunt as a survival skill from his father. His father, his name is Don, and even grew up, learning from his father. And he, as a father now, he uses hunting as a way to feed his family, to provide for his family. His two kids, one is Maigon, who is a 5-year-old boy, and the other is Nagon, who's a 3-year-old girl. And he just completely loves them, and he also is very appreciative of his wife, Nicole McLeod, who is the mother of the two kids that he has. And him and Nicole met very long time ago, actually. They went to the same kindergarten school, and they became couples in high school, and since then, they got married, and they've just loved each other for so long, and it's quite beautiful, honestly. And another thing to mention is sort of this time period that they're currently in. So it's currently winter, and what they're currently enduring is sort of this sudden power outage. It's sort of like a moment of emergency. They don't have electricity, no access to internet. They don't have sort of communication. Normally, they're able to sort of listen to the radio while they're driving within the local radios, and even be able to watch TV at home. But now they're not able to do these things, and so we are kind of seeing the attitudes from different characters and how this period is just deeply affecting them negatively. So, for example, within Evan's household, his kids are sort of not able to even watch TV like they used to when they get ready for school in the morning, and now they have to sort of talk to one another. These little kids having sort of conversations with one another, and it's kind of unusual because normally they watch TV while they're getting ready. And then we also see that through Evan's parents, his father Dan and his mother Patricia, we have a moment in one of the chapters in which Patricia is sort of getting frustrated at her computer not moving, or when she was trying to use the mouse and to try to click something, it just kept, not clicking because of the internet not working. And it just really shows how this time just really affected people negatively. And then we also have moments in which, now community leaders are trying to find ways to turn on the generator and find ways to sort of temporarily help people during this time of emergency. And so the community leader Terry, Terry, I don't remember his last name, but it starts with an M. He sort of as accent even and his best friend Isaiah to come help, and they sort of go around sending the news that, oh, we're gonna turn on the generator. They send out flyers and things like that to let people know that it's gonna be happening. So preserve the lights and don't use too much electricity. You know, preserve your food in the fridge. You know, so that you guys could at least be able to use the generator for this temporary amount of time until the electricity comes back, hopefully, you know. And that's one thing I've been keeping in mind as I'm reading this book and just being aware of the setting. And so I hope you watch the other videos to sort of give you a little background of what's led to what I'm going to be reading about today in chapter 8. And yeah, I'll get right onto it. Thank you for being here. Chapter 8. Fluorescent lights buzzed over Terry Meekes and the band counselors, who sat at two gray plastic tables at the front of the gymnasium, the centerpiece of the community complex and the biggest gathering space on the res. 300 chairs were lined neatly, but only about 50 of them were occupied. Terry turned to his cousin Walter. Jesus, where the hell was everyone? Should have promised proper food. Walter looked like a taller, younger version of the chief, but with long hair. How the hell we gonna cook for this many people? We're on the auxiliary generator power already. Besides, we could be looking at food rationing. Terry ran his fingers through his hair and sighed loudly. Don't worry about it, Terry, Candace North said. They will show up. It's harder to get around with all that snow, especially for the people who have to walk here. She flashed a sweet smile that pushed her cheeks up into her wide set eyes. Short and heavy set, she was Isaiah's mother and the auntie of the council, who was most often the voice of reason during meeting disputes. Let's give them another half hour or so. It looks like the coffee and cookies are holding them over, she reassured, gesturing at the few dozen in the crowd. Go have a smoke. Terry took her suggestion and walked outside. The remaining councils stayed, socializing with band members as they trickled in. Earlier that morning, after Evan had returned his plug to the yard, he had adjusted the breaker switches on the power panel to provide lights to the main entrance and to the gym. He had filled the diesel furnace with enough fuel to heat the space where the community was to gather later in the day. Now, he sat nearby in case they needed him for anything else. She's gotta wait now, I guess, Candace said to him. Even adjusted the beak of his blue ball cap and looked down at his feet before asking, So what's going on anyway? She sighed. We're not really sure yet. Terry's gonna ask everyone just to sit tight while we wait for communication to come back and we hear what's going on with the system down south. The chairs filled steadily, and finally about 100 people sat chatting in their winter gear while children chased each other down the ice and along the painted sidelines on the floor. Even saw his parents, his older sister Sarah, and her son Zigwan stroll in. He smiled at them, and the little boy, just a little older than his own son, waved. He noted that Cam was not with them. Back at the table, Terry scanned the gym. Relatives, friends, acquaintances, and political enemies sat before them. Governing a community this size, he and the council sometimes had to make decisions that not everyone liked. Some nodded or smiled at him. Others met his gaze without expression. The weathered faces of a dozen or so elders in the crowd analyzed his body language with their chins held high. He nodded at one in particular, Eileen Jones, and she nodded back. He cleared his throat and stood. Buzu, Mino Shuak Nagwe Kaina Waya, he began. Good afternoon, everybody. Chi Miigwech for coming down here today. As you all know, we've been having some problems with power and satellite connections. So, we are here to give you an update. First, though, I'd like to call up our elder Eileen to start this meeting with a smudge and a prayer. That was Evan's cue, and he walked over to Eileen. She was in her late 80s, one of the oldest of their community, and she had difficulty getting around, so Evan offered his arm to help her up. She looked up at him with eyes so dark the pupils were hard to distinguish from the irises. She smiled her sweet, slow smile that rippled the lines of her face. Her thin white hair draped the back of her neck loosely, and she mouthed a faint miigwech as she pulled herself to stand. She picked up the medicine bundle on the chair beside her and handed it to Evan. Evan reached into the cloth bag, sewn with white, yellow, red, and black material. He felt around for the large abalone shell he knew was inside and pulled it out. The iridescent interior was smooth and gleamed with a swath of subtle pinks and blues. He held the shell upright, its rough exterior nestled in his hand, while Eileen's reached into the medicine bag. Even could smell the sage before she even grabbed it. The entire gym was silent. Eileen pulled out the sticks of sage and motioned for Evan to hold the shell in front of her. She began breaking them into smaller pieces and piled them neatly in the basin of the shell. She wiped the smaller leaves that stuck to her fingers and palms onto the rest of the medicine. It was important to get it all. The sharp herbal aroma soothed Evan. Next, Eileen reached for a box of matches and a fan of eagle feathers that she handed to Evan. Her wrinkled hands trembled as she pushed open the cardboard box for a match. Her fingers rattled among the matchsticks and even worried she wouldn't be able to pinch one free. But she did and brought the red head of the match swiftly to the coarse side of the box. The loud pop of combustion resounded through the first rows of Jim, and the sulphur smell briefly wiped out the sage scent. Eileen brought the flickering orange light under the carefully piled sage in the shell, and the medicine caught fire. She let it burn for a few seconds before blowing it out. Thick grey smoke billowed from the shell in Evan's hand, and the unmistakable common smell of smudge slowly dispersed through the gym. Eileen shook out the match and placed it carefully in the shell. The elder moved through the ceremony as if this were muscle memory passed to her through countless generations. Ambe, Eileen said, motioning towards her torso with both her hands. Even carefully waved the feathers across the burning sage, moving more smoke through the room. Eileen cupped her hands over the smudge and stirred to guide it over her body. She washed it over her head, up and down her arms, down her torso, her legs, and then turned so Even could smudge her back and shoulders. Many in the crowd watched intently, awaiting their turn. Others were skeptical, and a smaller few took offense to the ritual, though it was an integral part of Anishinaabe spirituality. It represented a cleansing of the spirit, and the ceremony was believed to clear the air of negativity. It had become protocol to open any community event or council meeting with a smudge. This protocol had once been forbidden, outlawed by the government, and shunned by the church. When the ancestors of these Anishinaabe people were forced to settle in this unfamiliar land, distant from their traditional home near the Great Lakes, their culture wilted under the pressure of the incomers' Christianity. The white authorities displaced them far to the north to make way for towns and cities. But people like Eileen, her parents, and a few others had kept the old ways alive in secret. They whispered the stories and the language in each other's ears, even when they were stolen from their families to endure forced and often violent assimilation at church-run residential schools far away from their homes. They had out home. They had held out hope that one day their beautiful ways would be able to re-emerge and flourish once again. Okay, Eileen spoke softly to Even. Your turn. He handed her the shell and the fan and dipped his hands into the smoke to bring it close to himself. He turned so that his back was to her and let her disperse the medicine up and down his body. From behind him, she tapped each of his shoulders gently with the fan, and he turned back to face her and took the medicine from her hands. He walked clockwise around the gym, fanning the shell to push the smoke into the air and towards the seated townspeople. He then took a spot over to one side of the council table where people who wanted to smudge could line up. Eileen turned to the crowd and spoke. Buzuo, zawasogishwokwe ndizana kaz, she said. Wawashkesh ndondem, after introducing herself in anishinaabe. She addressed the crowd in English. Good afternoon, my relatives. Her quiet, authoritative voice echoed through the large room. Thank you all for coming here today. As an elder, she had the full attention of everyone in the room. Any eyes that might have rolled during the smudge were nonetheless now fixed on her. She was everyone's auntie, even if they weren't related by blood. Winter is here, she continued. Maybe it came a little earlier than we all expected. It's the time when the trees go to sleep, the bears go to sleep, we all rest, and then we will be reborn in the spring. But it's important to make sure we're ready. Now is the time to help your relatives prepare their winter homes. Make sure they have enough food, enough wood, enough medicine to make it through the dark season. Heads nodded in the crowd, even tried to read the faces. People no doubt thinking of their own winter inventory and what they would need. Some looked slightly panicked. So, I'm going to offer a prayer, she smiled. I'm gonna ask the Great Spirit to take care of us this winter. We're gonna need it. She smiled reassuringly and began to speak in her first language once again, introducing herself once more in anishinaabe, and then giving thanks for health and all the other gifts from the Creator. Eileen finished with a strong miigwech, and a smattering of responses rolled through the audience as they thanked the elder for opening the meeting. Candace helped her back to her chair, while Even finished smudging the last few people lined up in front of him. That was Terry's cue. He cleared his throat, wiped his palms on the thighs of his jeans, and stood up. He then thanked everyone who showed up to the all-members meeting. As you all know by now, he started, we're having some issues with the infrastructure here in the community. If you didn't know, you must be living under a rock. The feeble joke got a chuckle out of some people, and he relaxed a bit. He pushed it. Anyone who's still living under a rock is buried under 3 feet of snow by now. Louder laughter followed. A hint of tension lingered in some stoic faces, but most of it had dissipated. His voice became more serious. Last Wednesday, our satellite service went out. That knocked out TV and internet. Most of you noticed. Here, we just thought you were all coming to wish Walter a happy birthday. He giggled and looked down at his cousin, and the crowd chuckled again. These things happen, so we gave it a day. Sometime in there, the phone lines went down for some reason too. When all those things weren't working on Thursday, we tried to call our service provider down in Gibson with our off-grid sat phone, but that wasn't working either. We figured we'd wait another day just to see if it came on. Then, sometime overnight Thursday, the power went out. It's the first time we've lost power like that since connected to the grid 3 years ago. We sent our guys to check the nearest transformers. They looked fine, but they're dead. There's nothing coming in from the dam, and because we have no communication, we've had no updates. Pockets rustled as people whispered to neighbors and family. From their place at the front of the room, Terry and the counselors could see the anxiety building in the gym. Don't worry, we're confident it will come back on, he quickly uttered. They spent $100 million getting this line to us. The longer we go without power, the worse it will look on the province. So you can be sure there are people down in the big smoke and at the dam working on this right now. We just don't know exactly what the problem is yet. The rest of the councils, sorry, the rest of the counselors sat looking at their The rest of the counselors sat looking out at their relatives and friends. Each attempted to appear confident in the uneasy confusion. On Saturday, we turned on the generators so you could put the lights and heat back on, Terry reminded them. We wanted to give you a chance to keep working on whatever you still needed to do before winter. Stuff like arranging your food in your freezers and bringing wood inside. Looks like we did that just in time too. With We're keeping the generators on for the time being, but we still need you to conserve energy. Only turn on lights in the room you're in. Don't use your electric oven if you don't have to. If you're gonna watch DVDs, please do it sparingly. It's been a long time since the generators ran all winter. The diesel tanks are only half full. We're supposed to get some new shipments in once the service road is iced for the truckers. We ordered maintenance supplies last month, and that delivery is supposed to happen sometime in the next couple weeks. Same time as the next food truck load for the northern. But hopefully by then we'll be back on the grid. What the fuck, Terry? A voice shouted from the back. Evan's much older cousin, Mark, angrily pulled his toque off his head and stood up. So we just gonna wait around and hope this shit returns to normal? We're just asking you to be patient, Mark, the chief replied. The light shimmered off Mark's scalp that showed through his thinning brown hair. The plans are in place, the generators are running. That's what they're there for. Emergencies. They're doing what they're supposed to do right now. A soft murmur emanated from the crowd. Even couldn't tell if they were appeased or confused or both. So that's why we want you to conserve, Terry continued. At regular usage, we estimate that we'll run out of diesel by February. We don't think that will happen anyway, but to be on the safe side, don't use too much power. The crowd's restlessness grew. They had come for answers and were getting only very few. Only directions and orders. He's losing them, thought Even. So, because of that, Terry explained, the school and the band office will be closed for the rest of the week. We'll do our part here too. There will be a rotating staff to help with any problems. Public work is on duty all week. Until phone service is back, you would just have to come down here and ask if you need or want to know something. In the meantime, keep your stoves and furnaces going. We want you to stay warm. We also don't want your pipes to freeze. Terry wrapped up and Walter took over, explaining the service that would still be operational, like plunging, home visits for maintenance, the grocery store, the water treatment plant, and the health station for emergency medication. The crowd thinned as the meeting wound down. When it came time for questions before wrapping up, only about a dozen people remained, scattered behind Eileen, who sat stoically in the front row. Her poise appeased Even. He noticed an easy smile on her face. She's lived through it all, he thought. If she's not worried, then we shouldn't be. And that is the end of chapter 8. Interesting. That was good. So let's talk about it. Okay, so chapter 8, to sort of give a brief summary, we are sort of in a setting in which there is a community meeting. This is a community meeting in which they sent notice of a few chapter back. I think it was either chapter 6 or chapter 7, one of those chapters. They sent a notice letting the community know that there's now generator on temporarily due to the unfortunate sort of emergency going on. And they also included in that note that they were going to have a community meeting to sort of share more information. And this chapter sort of talks about that community meeting, in which many, sort of members of the community come to. In the meeting, the chief leader, Terry, and several counselors joined to sort of share what was going on. It started with Evans giving a speech and greeting the audience, and then he followed that by introducing a sort of prominent figure within their community who is like everyone's auntie in the community. She's one of the oldest. Her name is Eileen Jones, and she starts off her sort of time on stage with a ritual, and then she follows that with a speech. Within the ritual, she does things that are sort of been passed down through generation in the Anishinaabe community. And I found it beautiful that in the portion of the a section that I was reading, they mentioned that this ritual was sort of preserved in secret, and this was mainly because of sort of how during very early on, many white settlers who sort of came to native lands, they tried very hard to sort of remove a lot of native people from their lands, and due to this, it was hard for them to sort of preserve their culture and all that. But I was very moved by when they mentioned how they preserved. I'm sighing deeply right now because I have recorded like almost 4 videos, and each video I've received a notification that my storage is full, and so I'm gonna hope this one saves. But to continue what I was saying, I was very moved by how when I was reading the book, it talks about how native communities like the anishinaabe community were able to sort of preserve their culture and preserve their culture and to resist against the invaders who try to push them out of their lands. And so rituals like the one Eileen performed on stage highlights just the custom that's been passed down through generations. So that was important for me to mention. And we have the moment in which Terry gives a speech and sort of highlights on how, the power outage came to be and what they're sort of trying to do to help. And with the generators, he's sort of advising people to preserve electricity and conserve things, and use this chance to do things that will benefit them, so that by the time that, in February, when hopefully the electricity is back by then, if not by February, when diesel goes out, they still have things that they could still be managing on, because we we never know how this is gonna end up being for them. um, and yeah, and people were sort of full of anxiety and slight frustration. We have a moment in which a man is sort of shouting through the crowd. So things like this are important to highlight on, because these are the human, moods and attitudes and motives that we need to consider when reading. And so thank you for always joining me, and thank you for continuing to watch my videos. I hope you enjoy this one. I'm sorry for the, you know, interruptions and inconvenience, but I hope you still enjoyed. Thank you. Bye.